It's actually, last time I was in Poland was in 1984, so a lot has changed since then. You've built an amazing country. I was really surprised and just amazed as I came in last night and also saw this morning. It's really beautiful. I'm very excited to be here to share some of my thoughts about where mobility in the future is going. I'm currently working, or I've started Fisker Inc. a couple of years ago, where we are really looking into what is going to happen in the future and how do we shape the future of mobility. Now, I was given this headline here. I'm not sure what it means, but let's go through it a little bit. Obviously, we had a big transformation when we went away from the horse that has been our main transportation for thousands of years, and then went into the gasoline engine. Huge transformation. I think that the next big transformation would definitely be electrification. There's no doubt about it. And I'll go a little bit through what I mean by that. This is kind of the dream of the open road that car companies have sold the consumer over the last 100 years. And it's great when you get out on the open road, drive, and have a lot of fun. But this is probably reality for a lot of people when they go to work every day. Not quite as fun, not quite as free-spirited. But it's reality, and more people are moving into megacities, and we have to find a way, how do we keep them mobile, and how do we keep also the independent transportation system, the individual car. There's a lot of great ideas about getting people into buses and public transportation, but at the end of the day, as we went back and looked at the horse, you know, people still like their own horse. There was a lot of pride in that. And I think people in the future will still like, if they can afford it, their own car. So I think the key subject in the future is going to be about affordable electric mobility. There's a couple of things that is driving probably the most dramatic change ever in the car industry. And it's mainly three things that's the key driver that all crash in at the same time and is very difficult to deal with for the entire car industry. It is shared mobility, which is already in the works and has been for a while. It's autonomous vehicles, which probably, when it comes to private transportation, fully autonomous vehicles are still a few years away. And then there's electrification. And I actually think electrification is truly the biggest change that we're going to see. It's going to have the biggest impact on our beautiful planet, on environment. And it's something that I think is going to accelerate over the next 7 years like we have never seen it before. There's also, when we look at the three main drivers, the three main markets, the first is the US market, which I live in the US. It's purely consumer-driven. There's not a lot of sort of punishment in terms of you can't drive into the center of the city if you have a gasoline car or something like that. So it's really a consumer-driven market. When you look at Europe, it's probably a little bit of a mix. We see that some European cities might ban diesel cars first and maybe later gasoline cars for the center of the city. So that will have a big influence, the drive of electric vehicles. And then, of course, there's China, the biggest car market in the world. And I believe that China might be the first very large car market to totally ban the sale of gasoline and diesel cars. And when that happens, it will have a huge impact on the rest of the world, because today the car companies can no longer afford just to create vehicles for one market. We have to create global vehicles to get the economy of scale. And if China and when China goes fully electric, that will have a huge impact and further accelerate where we're going. But there's also a few other things that is changing in our world. The car culture. Yesterday's car culture were that when you were 18 years old, you ran out to buy a car. It might have been an old used car, but it was kind of like a sign of freedom. A sign of I'm finally free, I'm grown up, I can go where I want, I got my own car. And then later, got a family, got a little bit of career, got a job, and then we bought the family car, and that became a driver for a certain vehicle segment. And then third, when we finally maybe got a little further in our career, got a promotion, then we got the sedan, the luxury premium sedan that we always dreamed about. And that has kind of driven where and how the car industry thinks about their model mix and what they're doing. But this is already starting to change dramatically. We see today that the younger generation don't want the commitment of having to finance a vehicle or getting into a long-term lease. So instead, they have the ability to use ride-hailing and other forms of car sharing, etc. Of course, when we get into the family time, we probably will buy a vehicle or at least own a vehicle or need some sort of private transportation to take the kids around. And then I believe when we get to later in life where we can maybe afford something a little more special, I believe that what's going to be important is the statement that that vehicle makes that you're driving. So for Fisker, our mission is to make the world's most sustainable vehicles. Recycled materials, electric, solar panels on the roof, etc. We want to make a very strong statement about the environment when you drive a Fisker automobile. So that's something we're working on. I do believe when eventually we get autonomous vehicles and maybe in more geo-fenced areas that will benefit a lot of the population that today maybe can't drive themselves or don't feel comfortable with it. So that will definitely enhance mobility for a lot of people. Coming back to the freedom of the vehicle. Today, I would say our freedom device is probably not anymore the car. It's our smartphone. If I would ask everybody in here, what would you rather be without for a week? Would you rather be without your car or without your phone? Most people would probably rather be without their car because you can order a car on your phone. So, and this is becoming more and more clear all over the world, and it also means we have to think differently about what the vehicle does for you and how we interact with the vehicle and what type of vehicles we bring to the market. And that's something we are thinking about within Fisker Inc. as well, the overall ecosystem. One of the things that we have decided, and we're going to launch in end of November, we have decided we're a car company that's not going to sell any cars. We are only going to create what we would say a subscription model. You can also call it a flexible lease model. The idea behind that is basically that you don't need to commit. You don't need to commit to 36 months of owning this car. You don't have to finance the car. We will let you have a car and you can get it. You can give it back after a week, after 6 months, after 4 years, after 6 years. There's warranty for as long as you keep it. There is service included for as long as you keep it, and we'll also even change your tires for you. And we'll come and pick up the car when it needs service. You never have to take it to service. I believe that there's going to be a whole new generation of buyers who's going to want the flexibility, who's going to not want to commit the way we commit to buying cars today. What it does when you create such a model, it takes away the one-time sale, the one-time interaction with a customer. And anyway, most of the car companies actually never even interact with their customers because there's a middleman called a dealer. But it takes away that one-time sale, and instead you create a long-term relationship with the customer. You start being able to understand your customer, what their needs are, what the behavior patterns is, and how you can create an even better product. And believe me, the business model actually is also very interesting because versus a one-time sale, you're now making money on that vehicle every month, maybe for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And maybe after 10 or 12 years, we take that car back. Maybe it had 5 different owners, and we recycle it. What's going to be interesting is there may never be a residual value on that vehicle. So it's going to be interesting to see how that actually works. I believe that we are fundamentally changing how we are mobile and how we get access to vehicles. What this also does, it's going to make electric vehicles way more affordable. Electric vehicles are a lot easier to maintain. It's going to cost us, the car company, less to maintain them. We can offer this to the consumer. We're going to be able to offer lower insurance, again, because we own the vehicles, we service the vehicles, we keep the maintenance of these vehicles. But there's also things that has to drive electrification further than new business models, new exciting designs. Technology is a very important part. We have to find a way to actually bypass the gasoline engine when it comes to what is possible with the battery technology. So at Fisker Inc., in our headquarters in Los Angeles, we have actually set up a lab, battery lab, where we have about a dozen scientists working on the next generation battery technology. We call it solid-state battery technology. It's a technology that there's several others in the world working on. We have filed about 10 patents on it. We are building cells right now in our lab. We are not doing mass production. We are not even in pilot scale production yet, so it's very early on. But it's a technology that I believe ultimately will bypass the gasoline engine by far. And it's not just about being zero emission. These batteries are over 90% recyclable. As you can see on some of the numbers here, you'll be able to get twice the range. And with the latest chargers, we estimate we'll be able to charge about 200 miles, be about a little over 300 kilometers in about 10 minutes. With even better chargers, we can even do more than that, simply due to the type of battery this is. And solid-state batteries, not to go too deep in the technology part, is a battery that is solid, so it doesn't have any liquid electrolyte, which means they're very safe. They can't blow up like today's batteries, which unfortunately means today's batteries need to spend a lot of money on active cooling, which we can and we do, and it works. But with a solid-state battery, you don't need any active cooling, so the battery pack is much lower cost. The batteries for a vehicle is probably going to be about less than half the price than they are today, and I'm talking about whatever the cheapest batteries is today, and there's a huge difference, but we are talking well under $100 a kilowatt hour, or 100 euros under kilowatt hour. This technology, we hope we can get into testing in a vehicle by end of next year, but it still will be a few years after that until it gets commercialized. We also have to set up manufacturing lines, etc., for high-scale production. Not something that we want to do. We want to outsource that to somebody else. I know here in Poland that somebody's building a battery factory here in Poland. I think this is going to be another whole wave of new job creations that's going to happen when we get into the new battery technologies. It's a very clean way of creating these batteries, by the way. We use water as a solvent, which is very interesting. With that in mind, it's a short speech. I know I'm going to talk a little bit later. My belief is that in the future of mobility, we are moving into electric mobility. We are moving into new type of business models where it's going to be less ownership. And I do believe that we are going to end up with a fleet of vehicles over the next 10 years in the major markets in the world where over 50% of these vehicles will be electric. I actually think that there might be some countries, and we're already seeing that now, which will fully ban gasoline and diesel sales, new car sales, before 2030. It may not happen in some of the biggest markets, but some of the smaller markets, there's already about 10 countries in the European Union that are proposing that, and then there's some other countries around the world. And what's going to be interesting with that is that that will drive the rest of the world to an even faster change. And we have seen that, for instance, in the US, where once the automatic transmission fell under 30-40% of sales in the US, the car makers simply stopped making, manual transmission fell under 30-40%. The car makers simply stopped selling manual transmissions. Today, in America, you can barely buy a car with a manual transmission. And I expect electric vehicles is going to be the same. And once we get the scale in electric vehicles, they actually will be cheaper than today's gasoline vehicles. Not just to produce them, but it'll be lower cost for the consumer to maintain them. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.